This article is about a specific CIA program. For an overview of CIA influence on media, see CIA influence on public opinion. Operation Mockingbird is an alleged large-scale program of the United States Central Intelligence Agency CIA that began in the early 1950s and attempted to manipulate news media for propaganda purposes. It funded student and cultural organizations and magazines as front organizations. According to writer Deborah Davis, Operation Mockingbird recruited leading American journalists into a propaganda network and oversaw the operations of front groups. CIA support of front groups was exposed after a 1967 Ramparts magazine article reported that the National Student Association received funding from the CIA. In the 1970s, congressional investigations and reports also revealed agency connections with journalists and civic groups. None of these reports, however, mentions by name an Operation Mockingbird coordinating or supporting these activities. A Project Mockingbird is mentioned in the CIA Family Jewels report, compiled in the mid-1970s. According to the declassified version of the report released in 2007, Project Mockingbird involved the wiretapping of 2 American journalists for several months in the early 1960s. History added in the early years of the Cold War, efforts were made by the governments of both the United States and the Soviet Union to use media companies to influence public opinion internationally. In a 1977 Rolling Stone magazine article, The CIA and the Media, reporter Carl Bernstein wrote that by 1953, CIA Director Allen Dulles oversaw the media network, which had major influence over 25 newspapers and wire agencies. Its usual modus operandi was to place reports, developed from CIA-provided intelligence, with cooperating or unwitting reporters. Those reports would be repeated or cited by the recipient reporters and would then, in turn, be cited throughout the media wire services. These networks were run by people with well-known liberal but pro-American big business and anti-Soviet views, such as William S. Paley CBS, Henry Luce Time and Life, Arthur Hayes Salzberger The New York Times, Alfred Friendly Managing Editor of The Washington Post, Jerry O'Leary The Washington Star, Hal Hendricks Miami News, Barry Bingham, Senior Louisville Courier-Journal, James S. Copley News Services and Joseph Harrison The Christian Science Monitor. Reporter Deborah Davis claimed in her 1979 biography of Katharine Graham, owner of The Washington Post, Catherine the Great, that the CIA ran an Operation Mockingbird during this time. Davis claimed that the International Organization of Journalists that was created as a communist front organization received money from Moscow and controlled reporters on every major newspaper in Europe, disseminating stories that promoted the communist cause. Davis claimed that Frank Wisner, director of the Office of Policy Coordination, a covert operations unit created in 1948 by the United States National Security Council, had created Operation Mockingbird in response to the International Organization of Journalists, recruiting Phil Gramm from The Washington Post to run the project within the industry. According to Davis, by the early 1950s, Wisner owned respected members of The New York Times, Newsweek, CBS and other communications vehicles. Davis claimed that after Cord Meyer joined the CIA in 1951, he became Operation Mockingbird's principal operative. Congressional investigations ended after the Watergate scandal in 1972-974, the U.S. Congress became concerned over possible presidential abuse of the CIA. This concern reached its height when reporter Seymour Hersh published an expose of CIA domestic surveillance in 1975. Congress authorized a series of congressional investigations into agency activities from 1975 to 1976. A wide range of CIA operations were examined in these investigations, including CIA ties with journalists and numerous private voluntary organizations. The most extensive discussion of CIA relations with news media from these investigations is in the Church Committee's final report, published in April 1976. The report covered CIA ties with both foreign and domestic news media. For foreign news media, the report concluded that the CIA currently maintains a network of several hundred foreign individuals around the world who provide intelligence for the CIA and at times attempt to influence opinion through the use of covert propaganda. These individuals provide the CIA with direct access to a large number of newspapers and periodicals, scores of press services and news agencies, radio and television stations, commercial book publishers, and other foreign media outlets. For domestic media, the report states, approximately 50 of the agency assets are individual American journalists or employees of U.S. media organizations. Of these, fewer than half are accredited by U.S. media organizations. The remaining individuals are non-accredited freelance contributors and media representatives abroad. More than a dozen United States news organizations and commercial publishing houses formerly provided cover for CIA agents abroad. A few of these organizations were unaware that they provided this cover. CIA response edit. Prior to the release of the Church Report, the CIA had already begun restricting its use of journalists. According to the report, former CIA Director William Colby informed the committee that in 1973 he had issued instructions that as a general policy, the agency will not make any clandestine use of staff employees of U.S. publications which have a substantial impact or influence on public opinion. In February 1976, Director George H. W. Bush announced an even more restrictive policy, effective immediately. CIA will not enter into any paid or contractual relationship with any full-time or part-time news correspondent accredited by any U.S. news service, newspaper, periodical, radio or television network or station. By the time the Church Committee report was completed, all CIA contacts with accredited journalists had been dropped. The committee noted, however, that accredited correspondent meant the ban was limited to individuals formally authorized by contract or issuance of press credentials to represent themselves as correspondents, and that non-contract workers who did not receive press credentials, such as stringers or freelancers, were not included. Project Mockingbird wiretapping operation added. In 2007, a CIA report titled The Family Jewels was declassified. Compiled by the CIA in 1973, it refers to a Project Mockingbird and describes a wiretap of journalists. The report was compiled at the request of then CIA Director James R. Schlesinger. According to the report, Project Mockingbird, a telephone intercept activity, was conducted between March 12, 1963 and June 15, 1963, and targeted two Washington-based newsmen who, at the time, had been publishing news articles based on, and frequently quoting, classified materials of this agency and others, including top secret and special intelligence. The wiretap was authorized by CIA Director John A. McCone, in coordination with the Attorney General Mr. Robert Kennedy, the Secretary of Defense Mr. Robert McNamara, and the Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency General Joseph Carroll. An internal CIA biography of McCone by CIA Chief Historian David Robarg, made public under an FOIA request, identified the two reporters as Robert S. Allen and Paul Scott. Their syndicated column, The Allen Scott Report, appeared in as many as 300 papers at the height of its popularity. We are anonymous. We are a legion. United as one. Divided by none. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.